So a few weeks ago, Tracy showed me this funny video from the Royal Shakespeare Society. And it starts off with an actor, and he comes on stage, and he says...
To be or not to be. That is the question.
Sorry. I mean, yes.
And then this other actor interrupts him to say...
Or. To be or not to be. Because it's the choice. It's the choice.
Hi. To be or
yeah.
Not to be.
Yeah, that's right. To be or...
It's not the skull.
What?
It's not the skull. That's the wrong speech, the wrong soliloquy.
It's Hamlet always has his skull.
So anyway, this goes on for a little while between these two actors, and then... What's his name? Benedict... How do you say his name? Benedict Cumberbatch? Anyway, the Doctor Who guy comes on.
Sorry. I just... I'm sorry, Papa, hi. I couldn't help but I was just overhearing. It's really not that. Try this. To be or not to be, that is the question.
No.
To be or not.
No, to be or... not. It's a choice. Or not to be, that is the question.
And then a succession of different actors come on the stage, and they say things like...
To be or not to be. That is the question.
Right, it's simple.
Or.
Don't lose focus. To be or not to be, that is the question.
And then, finally, Prince Charles comes on, and he says...
Just leave him alone.
Might I have a word? Do you mind? I hope you don't mind, but just a minute. Just a minute. To be or not to be, that is the question.
So we thought it was interesting how these are all great examples of how changing the word that's stressed in a sentence can completely change the meaning of the utterance. So today we're going to try and answer 3 questions.
What is sentence stress and why it is important, and how do we teach sentence stress? Okay, when we're talking about sentence stress, and of course we have word stress, phrase stress, and sentence stress. And so, Ross, can you just quickly give us like the definition of what stress is?
So it's basically the relative emphasis that you put on a phoneme or a syllable. So, and it's usually characterized by that syllable being louder and the length of the vowel being longer.
Okay,
like
for
I
example,
just did with longer.
Longer, okay. Like the example you just played at the very beginning, or to be or not to be.
Yeah, so you can hear the or and or is longer and louder. So most of the languages in the world can be
stress timed and syllable timed.
So can you give us an example of each of them?
English is stress timed, and Chinese is syllable timed. So basically, when we're speaking Chinese, we give each word each weight and each time. For example, 我回家吃饭, I go home and have dinner. But English is stress timed, so we give certain words, like you said, maybe we stress on certain words and they sound louder and longer.
So Tracy, why might you stress a particular word?
I think it depends on if you are going to give new information. For example, I'm going to Paris for a conference with Ross. So maybe I was having a conversation with somebody and they assume I'm going to the conference with someone else. But actually, when I said a sentence, I stress Ross. So that's information for that person I was talking to.
So that's the new part.
Yeah.
Any other examples?
Yeah, if you like to change the meaning. For example, you say, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry," but maybe you just piss off somebody, and that person, cannot forgive you straight away and still pissed off, and you would like to address, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry." So you are a little bit sarcastic, and why are you still pissed off? So you change the meaning by shifting the stress in a sentence. Ross, do you have any other examples?
I guess one is like contrast. So, for example, if I said I have 2 master's degrees, right? I stress the master's. But if you said, well, I have 3 master's degrees, right? The stress shifts to the number because that's the bit that's different. And that even happens with word stress, right? Like if you think of what country are you from?
China.
So you are
Chinese.
So normally it's knees is the stress bit, right? But if you're talking about those people we saw on the subway the other day who like tried to rush and steal that foreigner's seat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Are they Chinese or Japanese? You put the stress forward on the bit that's different, right? So you wouldn't say are they Chinese or Japanese. You'd say are they Chinese or Japanese.
Okay.
A typical example of something I might say to you is, Tracy, when are we going to finish that podcast on sentence stress? Right? So that's like I'm emphasizing the topic. But if I say, when are we going to finish that podcast on sentence stress? It's like I'm emphasizing that we're looking at the podcast, not about the training.
Yeah.
And if I say, Tracy, when are we going to finish that podcast about sentence stress? I'm emphasizing that it's stress and it's not about sentence syntax.
Yeah.
So really subtly that where you put the stress in the sentence can really alter the meaning of what you're saying. Why is it important for teachers to spend time talking about stress?
And I think the first thing is really important for listening skills because normally students cannot hear every single word. And of course, and I think if they focus on sentence stress and they can listen for the content word, which carrying the meaning, the functional words or the grammar words, so usually are not that important. So I think if students realize or they have the knowledge or they are able to be aware of the sentence stress, I think they can focus on more the content words instead of the functional words.
Which is probably a really useful listening strategy as well, right? Because I think for a lot of students, I see them like trying to understand every single word. And especially here in China, students, I think, are used to seeing the words written down first before they hear them. So students are maybe really surprised when a word changes, like the King of Denmark. If you were saying that quickly, you'd say the King of Denmark. So of changes to
Yes, and also I think another thing is, and they spend a lot of time to listen for all the grammar words, which are not that important. So they try to concentrate on that and then miss the content words.
So that was listening. Why is it important for speaking?
Generally speaking, there were 2 things. Number one, you don't want to sound like a robot, right? Just like you stress on every single word. I am going home for dinner. So it sounds really unnatural. And another thing...
And just annoying to listen to as well, right?
And again, just go back to the different type of language. In English, stress timed. You can see it sounds like rhythm. But of course, especially for Chinese learners, it's a bit challenging because it's another type of language.
So we've covered what sentence stress is, why it's important. Let's talk about how we can teach it.
Yeah, Ross, have you ever done anything in your class before to either draw the students' attention of sentence stress or teach them how to?
So I guess like earlier, there's 2 parts, right? You can maybe teach it as a listening sub-skill. So focus on it for pronunciation for listening, or you can do something more productive for speaking. The most simple one for speaking is just whenever you drill something, you get students to clap along with it.
I will be your student.
Okay.
And just
To be or not to be, that is the question. To be or not to be, that is the question.
Okay. I remember I tried that in my class before. It just ended up students doing like, to be or not to be, that's the question.
So I think with that, you could just start off with the stress ones. Be, not, that question. To be or not to be, that is the question.
Okay.
So just start off with the stress ones and then add in the unstressed ones later.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for me, that students often don't have problems with, at least speaking-wise, they don't have problems with stress. they have problems with unstress. So
That's true.
sometimes it's most important, for me at least, that we teach students how to pronounce the unstressed words and focus on them.
Do you mean, for example, like the schwa sound? I'm really good at cooking, or I'm really good at cooking. Or
So we were talking about back chaining earlier, right? So for that, you could say cooking, cooking, good at cooking. I'm really good at cooking. Yeah.
yeah.
So starting
Okay.
off with the word at the end and then going forward rather than the opposite way around.
Okay, so the back chaining is always works better than the front chaining. So yeah, just curious, why is better?
I think it's because it's if you go from the front back, you always add you're repeating the bit at the front the most times, and it's easy to forget the stuff at the back. But the other way, you put the stuff at the back, you say that the most often, so it's easiest to remember, right? So if we have an example question like, I don't know, stress,
Stress,
sentence stress,
sentence stress.
talk about sentence stress,
Talk about sentence stress.
We're going to talk about sentence stress.
We're going to talk about sentence stress.
Today we're going to talk about sentence stress.
Today we're going to talk about sentence stress. I understand. So you repeated like the information a few times, so you add a new information. And it's unlikely for people to forget about
Bit
the
at the back
information. Yeah,
at the end.
repeat it. Okay.
So that was speaking. Do you have a couple of examples for what we can do to get students to practice listening?
I think listening, yeah, the easiest one is just either give them the audio script or not. So let them listen to the words, the stressed words, and they can highlight it. And then they can notice what kind of words were stressed. They can notice like the, and this kind of functional words, unstressed. Do you have any other?
Yeah, also I guess doing the opposite of that, right? Of showing them maybe like sentences said two different ways, one with more stress and one with less stress on certain words, and then getting them to notice the difference, for example, in meaning. So you can also let them hear the same sentence stressed different ways and ask them to pick out which word is stressed and then how it changes the meaning. Like, what are we going to learn in class today? As opposed to, what are we going to learn in class today? And what are we going to learn in class today? And ask them to pick out what's the difference between these and how does it change the meaning.
Oh, when you mention this, I think sometimes the teacher probably can mislead the students a little bit, like they're trying to maybe correct the students' grammar mistakes. Maybe students say it's blue car, and the teacher try to correct the mistake. It's a blue car, and maybe some students in the future just stress the instead of the content words.
So you have to be really careful, I guess, when you're correcting students to model something that makes sense. And then I guess one final thing for speaking that you could do would be, instead of actually getting students to say the words, just get them to go, So for example, that was me saying, thank you, see you next time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Or, good podcast today. Do you want to say something to all the listeners before you go, using What was that?
Sentence stress difficult.